Back to this video tutorial, we can discuss some more program based on the functions in C. Okay, and in this video we can learn how to pass uh, one dimensional array or two dimensional array as parameter to the functions. Okay, we have already discussed one problem, that is find the sum of elements of a given array. Now we can implement the C program for that particular problem using functions. Okay, so here we have one function with name array sum and the return type is int, and for this particular function we need two inputs. That means here listed two parameters. First one is an integer parameter, second one is also an integer parameter, but here it is an integer array representation, right? So for passing a single dimensional integer array, we must follow this particular syntax in case of function declaration. So consider the difference. Here it indicate, here we want to pass the first parameter as single integer value, and here it indicates the second parameter is an integer array with maximum size 10 integer values, right? So this is the case of, or this is the variation or change while passing and one dimensional array as an input to the function. Okay, so after this declaration, now we can consider the definition part of this array sum function. Okay, inside this we can calculate the sum of elements of this particular given array. The first one is a single integer n, that is actually indicating the number of elements of our array A. Okay, this n and a are actually formal parameters, right? So using these formal parameters we can implement the function body. Okay, so how to implement? Here as s is set as 0. S is an integer variable initialized with value 0. Okay, this s is used for accumulating the sum value after this complete summation, and I is used for iterating variable. For iteration, I is used for iteration. Okay, so inside this loop we can add each and every element of our given array one after another, and after completing this iteration, this s get accumulated with the total sum values of elements of our given array. Okay, and here the return type is int. So at the end of execution of this particular function, it must return an integer value. Here we are going to return the sum value as a result. Okay, where it returns to the location from which it is called. Okay, now we can move to the main function. What are the statements present inside this main function? Here we have one declaration for an array, and we have another sum variable, one iterating variable I, and n for indicating number of elements that we want in our array. So first we want to read from the keyboard the number of elements that user required. Number of elements inside the array that user required. So after that we can read and initialize each and every elements of our array using this particular loop. And after that, after this initialization, we can call the function for finding the sum of elements of our array. So the calling is of the form array sum of n comma a, because first we need to pass a single integer, that is actually for indicating number of elements of our array. So here we pass the first parameter as n. This is the actual value of our array limit, which is already read from the keyboard. Okay, now we want to pass the name of our array as the second input. So this is the format for calling a function in which one of this parameter is an array element. One of this parameter is an array. Here it is a one-dimensional array. We don't want to specify size of the array while calling a function. just declare or just use the name of the array. That is enough while calling this function. Okay, this n indicate the number of elements or limit of our array, and a indicate the name of our array. But in case of declaration and definition, we need to specify type, name as well as the maximum capacity of our array. Here also type, name as well as maximum capacity of the array. But while calling this function, we don't want to specify the type and the maximum size. Simply specify the name of the array. That is the difference. Okay, so after calling, what happened? It transfer control from this particular location to the starting of array body. Sorry, array sum function body. That is here in this particular point. Okay, what is the first step? Next, we want to copy the value of this particular variable to this particular value. After that, we want to copy each and every element of our array A. That is already initialized here. We want to copy each and every element to this particular formal parameter. Right? After this copying, we can start the execution of this function body. Right? So for accumulating the result, here declare a new variable which is local to this function. That means we can use this variable only inside this function because these are declared inside this function body. Okay, so after finding the sum value, finally after completing the summation, it returns the sum value back to where? Back to the location from which the function is called. That is, it returns the value here. So here we need an variable of the same type of this function return type. Here it is of type integer as the return type of this function. So here we use another integer variable to receive the value returned after the execution of this particular function. So the sum value is received here in this variable. Okay, so now we can simply display the sum value. Okay, so this is the case of passing a one-dimensional array as an argument or a parameter to our function. That is the syntax. Once more identify the difference. Once more go through this. Here we need to specify type, name as well as the capacity of the or the size of the array. Here and also here in this definition part. Okay, and while calling the function, we need to use simply the name of the function. That is enough while calling a function. Okay, so this is the format while passing array as argument to the function. Okay, but here we need to consider one more point, that is an function can return only a single value here. Okay, we can't return more than one number of elements as return value. So keep in mind, in this particular type of function implementation, we can return only one value at a time. Okay, now we can execute this. Number of elements of an hour, I am going to enter a 3 by 3. Sorry, I am going to enter an array with 3 elements. Okay, and the first element is 3, second element is 2, third element is 1, and the array sum equal to 6. Okay, it displays the array sum. Okay, once again I'm going to execute this. I'm going to enter the number of elements as 10, maximum capacity of our declared array. Okay, now I am going to enter 1 2 3 4 5 6 7 8 9 and finally 0. So the sum equal to 45 here. Okay, so this is about passing an array, one-dimensional array as argument to our function. Now we can consider one more program in which we can pass a two-dimensional array as argument to the function. Okay, and here the problem is to find sum of two matrices. Right, here we want to find the sum of two matrices. Okay, and here we have 3 different functions. One is a read function for reading the read and initialize the elements of our array. Sorry, our matrix. Okay, and matrix sum is for finding the sum of two different matrices. And after using this display function, we can display a matrix. Okay, so what are the parameter of our read function? Its return type is void. That means it returns nothing. It is used for simply initializing the matrix elements. Okay, and the capacity is given as 5 by 5. Maximum is 5 rows and 5 columns, right? So here we have two single integer variables. We need to pass two integers as first two arguments, and third one is an integer matrix, right? And this one indicate row size, this one indicate column size. That means this is used for passing. The first parameter is used for representing row size, second parameter used for representing column size, and third one indicate the matrix itself is of type integer. And for the display function, for displaying each and every matrices, right? So the syntax is exactly like read. Here we need to specify first the row size, second the column size, and the matrix that we want to display as the third parameter. Okay, the syntax is almost similar to our previous case, but here we need to specify both the dimensions, row size and column size. That is the only one difference while passing a matrix with passing a one-dimensional array. Okay, so this one is used for finding the matrix sum. So what are the parameter we want to pass here? The row size, column size, and the two matrices that we are used for finding the sum of two matrices. Okay, so we need to pass first matrix, then the second matrix. And the syntax of passing matrices as an argument is we need to specify type, name, and row size and column size. Okay, so now we can consider the definition of this function one after another. So here we have this read function. Read function is used for initializing the matrix. Okay, so use two iterating variables. These are local to this function. Okay, so using this we can scan from keyboard and initialize each and every location of our matrix. This R, C and X are considered as formal parameters because they are present inside this function definition. Okay, and for display function, this is actually used for displaying the elements in matrix form. Okay, already initialized here. Using this read function and using this display function, we can display the elements in matrix form. And this is the matrix sum function. This is actually used for finding the sum of elements, corresponding elements of two matrices. Okay, we need to specify row size, column size, and the first matrix, second matrix. These are all formal parameters. Using these formal parameter, we can implement the function body. So here we have one more matrix that is local to this matrix sum function. So we can use here in order to accumulate the result of this matrix addition. Okay, so after this summation, using these loops we can find the sum of corresponding elements of these two matrices and accumulated here in new matrix sum. Okay, after the summation, after completing the summation, we can display the result value. Okay, we can directly return this matrix as a result to the called location because here matrix actually contains more number of elements. Okay, in this particular method of function implement, we can transfer or return only a single element as a return type. So we can't transfer all these sum values as a return value to our called location. Okay, keep in mind in this particular method of function implementation, we can transfer only or we can transfer or we can return only a single result value to the called location. For transferring more number of elements as a return value, we need to use the concept pointer. Okay, we can learn about the pointer in sometimes later. Okay, now we can directly display the sum value of our matrix directly inside this function. Okay, so once more, in order to transfer more number of elements as return value of a function, we need to use another concept, that is about the pointer. Okay, we can learn about the pointer in later section. Okay, in this particular method of function implementation, it can return only a single value, a single integer value as return value, or single floating point value, or a single character, etc. In order to transfer more number of value, we need to use pointers. Okay, now we can execute this. So I'm going to enter a 2 by 2 matrix first, and enter the elements as 1 2 3 4. Enter the matrix elements of second matrix. Okay, again I am going to enter 5 6 7 8. Okay, so 1 2 3 4 is the first matrix, 5 6 7 8 it is the second matrix, and the matrix sum is 6 8 10 12. Okay, so this is the output. So before that, we need to consider, I forgot to explain about this main function. So consider that here we have R and C for indicating row size, column size. A indicate first matrix, B indicate the second matrix. Okay, so we need to read row and column size first from the keyboard. After that, using this, we can read the elements of A matrix, and after read the elements of B matrix. What are the arguments or parameters required? Row size, column size, and the actual array. Sorry, actual matrix. Here it is A. And read the second matrix into B. So row size, the same column size with matrix as B. After initializing A and B matrices, we can display these two matrices in the matrix format. For that, we can use the display function. So the arguments are R, C, then array, or the matrix that we want to display. Here also R, C, and the matrix that we want to display. After that, we can perform the matrix addition using this matrix sum function. What are the arguments required? Row size, column size, first matrix, second matrix. R, C, A, B. A and B are the two matrices that we are going to add. So while calling this, what happened? It will transfer control. While calling this, what happened? It move into the body of this read function and read the elements from the keyboard and initialize A array or A matrix. After while calling the second read, what happened? Again move here and using this row and column size initialize the elements of B matrix. And while calling this display functions, it display first the elements of first matrix and elements of second matrix in a matrix format. And after that, while calling this matrix sum with R, C and A and B, what happened? Transfer control to this location and find the sum of elements of these two matrices and display the sum value. Okay, so this is the program for finding the sum of elements of two matrices. Okay,